This week, there are a few young wide receivers that you might want to get a hold of if they're still on waivers right now. But I also have a couple of veteran players you might want to consider stashing too. NFL trade deadline is just days away. There still might be some players of fancy relevance on the move, and this is a good time to get them before everybody else is scrambling to pick them up. It's been a weird year for running back. Weird in the sense that a lot of them are not getting hurt, and a lot of guys that were drafted early are actually performing well. Yeah, that's unusual, and that's just the way it's been. And so, with a guy like DeAndre Swift really paying off for Chicago, Khalil Herbert has not only been relegated to third string, he's now been deactivated as of week 8, didn't even suit up. It only makes sense that a team in need of running back would offer a 5th, 6th round pick, something to get a guy like Khalil Herbert. And that is exactly what might happen. Heard from the Chicago Tribune's Brad Biggs that his agent has gotten permission to seek a trade. The question is now, which teams are interested, and are they going to want to give up a draft pick to get a guy like Herbert? And why wouldn't they? This is a guy who's been productive when given the chance. A 4.8 yard per carry rushing average for his career. That's pretty good. And he can rip off big plays. We've seen him do it. Not so great as a receiver. That's the limitation. He's really more of an early down back. He can get you those long runs, some explosiveness, but he's definitely not an every down back. And maybe a liability on third downs, passing down. So limited, but still, don't tell me there aren't teams like the Cowboys who could use a running back. I mean, I know we've been trying to link every running back to the Cowboys. It doesn't seem like they want any help. I don't know why, but for some reason, the logical thing is not going to happen. But maybe, just maybe, after losing again, the Cowboys get desperate enough to do this. And it wouldn't be far fetched for a team like the Chargers, who remember Gus Edwards is on IR. Kamani Vidal hasn't really done much as of yet. Maybe they go for another running back to help fortify that backfield. Every time we get involved in trade rumors, it's pure speculation. All right, get that? So we have no idea if, when anything might happen. Take a shot here because if Herbert does get dealt, that means a team is interested in utilizing him. They wouldn't give up a pick or make a move if they weren't going to actually give him carries. And again, this guy could, just with a few carries, do something to help your fantasy team because he's done it before. Why wouldn't Chicago do something here? This is the final year of his rookie deal. He's on the cheap. A team can get him very easily and plug him in there. So let's just hope it happens. I'm stashing Herbert right now in leagues where I have room, just in case it does. And you know what? Worst case, if he doesn't get shipped out of Chicago, then you just drop him. I do have another trade candidate in mind, but let me get to the young wideouts first. So let's start with the new openings that have come because of trades that have just happened. For example, in Carolina, Deontay Johnson just opened up a ton of vacated targets because he's really been the only wide receiver of note in that offense. So yes, last week talked Xavier Legette. He seems to be the number one guy there, but what about Jalen Coker, a guy who stepped up and was actually even more productive than Legette last week? There's an opportunity for both of these players. Deontay Johnson had a near 25% target share. That was top 12 among all wide receivers over the first 8 weeks. And even though Deontay just got traded this week, sat out last week because, well, they knew that he was going to get traded. In this game without Deontay, basically their first game post DJ, Jalen Coker was the leading receiver with 78 yards on 4 receptions and a touchdown for the Panthers. Now, don't at me with the whole, yeah, that touchdown was in the very last seconds of a blowout loss. I know that. I watched that happen. So I understand this was basically garbage time stats for him. Does it really matter? I mean, come on, first quarter, last quarter, a touchdown's a touchdown, yards are yards. In week 9, it might not even come to garbage time because the Panthers play the Saints, who over the past month have been the worst pass defense in the entire NFL. And so Coker could do something early. But again, whenever he does it, wherever he does it, he's at least got a good, healthy target share here. And Bryce Young, I know, it doesn't seem like it's happening here, and it's probably not so much him as it is the franchise, which worries you. But hey, Coker getting targets, he's talented. This is a guy who now has an opportunity to hit those big plays. Legette is more the big body underneath receiver. Coker seems to be the guy who's going to get those longer shots. Very small sample size, to be sure, but right now a 13.3 average depth of target, which is encouraging. Speaking of the Saints, there's definitely some targets available there. Yeah, Chris Olave is back. He's a stud. We know this. But Rashid Shaheed is done for the season. And no disrespect to Bub Means. What about Bub Means? Nope. Bub Means is also hurt, got a high ankle sprain. Cedric Wilson was the leading receiver a couple weeks ago. Nope, he missed last week with a hip injury, didn't practice early for week 9. So let's now go all the way down to Mason Tipton. You've got to be a pretty diehard football fan or Saints fan to know about Mason Tipton. He's an undrafted free agent out of Yale University. Tipton did have a nice showing in the preseason in training camp, which is why he actually made the cut and made this team despite not being drafted. He actually had a nice game just a couple weeks ago as well. 6 catches, 45 yards on 9 targets. And that was with Spencer Rattler. Good news here is Derek Carr is coming back, so he's going to have an upgrade at QB. And again, these targets, I don't think people understand. It's not so much the targets because I don't think this is a pass-heavy offense ever. But Rashid Shaheed, even though he didn't get a ton of targets, he vacated a ton of air yards. Believe it or not, Rashid Shaheed was 3rd among all receivers in air yard share for his team, almost 48%. Talk about getting deep shots. That's what he did. Now, Tipton's not that fast, and he's not that type of receiver. But the point is, there are some air yards up for grabs here, and Tipton could get a ton in week 9 against the Carolina Panthers. Now, it's got to be pretty deep for you to start considering to flex a guy like Tipton. I might throw him in like a DFS tourney or something like that. Maybe pick him on underdog, let's say, go higher and see what he can do. But if you're in a deep enough league, definitely somebody to consider because he could now all of a sudden be the number 2 target in the Saints offense. And by the way, if you do picks on underdog for NFL pick'ems, you want to take this one if you're new for the very first time trying it. Jalen Hurts just getting a yard. That's right. For week 9 on Sunday, if Jalen Hurts gets at least 1 total yard, you win that pick. But this is for new customers. If you sign up for the very first time using code ENDGAME, you get this pick. Take the higher on that and then take a chance on any other NFL pick you like. If you haven't tried it now, it's a good time. If you got this far in, I'll just tell you, this might be the most fantasy relevant of all the picks I'm going to say that you want to stash here. Parker Washington in Jacksonville. He also gets to step into an opportunity because Christian Kirk done for the season. And as far as week 9 goes, look, Brian Thomas Jr. is day to day, not sure exactly whether he'll suit up or not. Gabe Davis also was banged up with a shoulder injury. I think he'll play, but I also don't think that really matters based on how he's been targeted in this offense. Now, if you played last year in fantasy or if you watched us last year, you might have heard the name Parker Washington before. That's because he was kind of a hot ad for a minute, and that is because he went for 6 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown in his first real action in the NFL later in the season. And partly that's because Christian Kirk was hurt, and partly because they were looking for something, anything to spark that offense. That was at the start of the downslide where the Jags could not stop losing. So Parker Washington became a viable target. This is also back when they had Zay Jones collecting a bunch of targets. Look, there are a lot of targets still up for grabs because the Jaguars' defense is horrific. And this week, going against the Eagles, I sense a lot of opportunities for garbage time production. So last year when Washington did play, look, he did get a pretty healthy target share himself. The productivity wasn't always there. Like I mentioned, after that first game with the 61 yards, the next week he did score a touchdown, but only caught a pair of passes. The next 2 weeks after that, he combined for 10 targets, but the yardage was very minimal, used mostly on kind of underneath routes. We might see something similar here. This is really more of like a floor as a deep flex option. I don't think there's a ton of upside. Let's just face it, this Jacksonville team is falling apart again this year. They just started a lot earlier this year, or I guess you could say they're carrying it over from the end of last year. Whatever. The point is, Peterson's probably on his way out. T-Law ain't it, and this team is a mess. But hey, even bad teams can put up numbers. They'll have to throw the ball a lot, and Parker Washington might this week need to be the number 2 target. All right, now one more vet who maybe will get traded, really should have been by now. Remember Mike Williams? Yeah, technically still with the Jets, just not really doing anything because, well, Aaron Rodgers basically threw him under the bus and then put it in reverse and ran him over. They got Devontae Adams. They don't need Mike Williams, but some team could use him. The Texans, without Diggs now, maybe if none of those other receivers step up, maybe they go with a veteran here in Williams. The 49ers, without Brandon Ayuk, maybe they prefer a veteran presence there. The Bucks, no Chris Godwin, they could use somebody. And of course, I have to mention the Chiefs. I know it feels like forever since Mike Williams has done anything to make us take notice or want to roster him. It wasn't that long ago. The injury look cost him basically all of last year and most of this year. To be honest, that Jets offense looks pretty dysfunctional. It doesn't seem to be Mike Williams' fault that he wasn't putting up numbers there. This is a former top 10 overall pick with a career 15.5 yards per catch average. The talent is there. I know he's a little older. The speed isn't quite there anymore. But still, if he lands in a favorable spot, you might be looking to pick him up. Why don't you do it ahead of time? You should always look to Fantasy Endgame for your advice to help you win. Week 9 is almost here. If you didn't catch all our start sit videos and everything else we have to help you out, check it out in this playlist.